Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the session on an innovative approach to developing language and skills by Ms Debarati Roy. Ms Debarati Roy has been an ESL trainer for over a decade now. She has been associated with the British Council as a teacher, corporate trainer, and a teacher trainer. She is also an entrepreneur. Her philosophy rests not on lecturing, but also on making learning happen through increased student participation and through promoting learner autonomy. Using a wide array of teaching approaches and methodologies has enabled her learners to make the language serviceable. I now request Ms. Debarati Roy to take this session forward.
Thank you, Nidhi. Very good evening, everybody. Before I start, can we all just put the audio buttons on mute? So that's just going to make things a little easy for everybody. So yeah, good evening, and I hope everybody is well, everybody is safe wherever you are. I hope the current situation has not really impacted you or your loved ones, wherever they are, in whichever part of the world. So today's session, as Nidhi mentioned, is going to be on a particular technique that we can use in our classrooms, especially in a language classroom, but we'll look at how we can use it in other classrooms as well. So we'll jump right in. So I have an image to start off with, and as you can see that this lady does not look very happy. What exactly do you think could this lady be going through at this point in time? Do you think anybody would like to give it a go? You can unmute yourself and speak. Maybe.
She is anxious. There's a bit of anxiety.
Okay.
And
anything else?
She's stressed.
And what do you think could be the causes of the stress?
Work-life balance.
All right. And what exactly is going wrong with that particular balance?
Time management.
Okay.
Time management. Anything else?
She is overworking, perhaps.
Maybe she doesn't have time for herself, perhaps. Okay, all right. So I mean, the situation right now is such that most of us are feeling this way because we have too many things on our plate to deal with. And however possible, we try to make things work out, and we make changes to our schedule, we changes to our routine, to our habits, to accommodate changes in our life, right? So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to read out a particular text. And as I do that, you will be listening to a person who is going through certain changes which are not really very comforting, things that can stress out people. Before I start to read out text, I would request everybody to be ready with pen and paper, because you will have to write certain things down. So I'll give you 30 seconds to be ready with pen and paper. Okay. So I'm going to read out this particular text, and I want you to, the guesses that you just made about not being able to strike work-life balance, not being able to manage time properly, etc., etc. Let's just read this, let's just listen to this text and see if any of our guesses or predictions matched or not. I'll tell you what you have to write and when you have to write. But right now, just check if your guesses were right. When I set off for work this morning, my car broke down, so I ended up taking the bus. As soon as I got off, I bumped into an old schoolmate, Mark, and got late talking to him. When I clocked in, my boss had a go at me, telling me off in front of everybody. When I got over the initial shock, I told her I'd make up for being late, but it turned out that she had blown up over a deal that had fallen through after a client of mine had pulled out of a contract. She told me that I wouldn't get away with it, that I'd let everybody down. I just went on and on and on. Okay. Did any of your predictions match? You can unmute yourself and speak.
Not really.
So it did have something to do with work, so maybe partially there. Did any, maybe somebody had thought about it, but didn't really mention anything like that, anyone? Okay, fine. Yeah, sorry. Yes, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I'm looking for some answers, responses from Facebook, so I don't see.
Okay.
They say no.
Okay, all right. So fine, it did not really match. But let's just say that, do you think it's an impossible situation, or do you think many of us have gone through things like this, reaching office late, being told off by the boss, things like that, car breaking down in the middle of the road? Do you think these things are common?
Yeah, very common.
Very common.
Yeah, pretty common. And I'm sure it has happened with every one of us at some point in our lives.
Yeah.
So, yeah, all right. Now I'm going to read the text again. And this time I want you to note down the key words or phrases from the text. Okay? You obviously will not be able to write down the whole sentences, but just focus on the key words. All right, so I'm going to start. When I set off for work this morning, my car broke down, so I ended up taking the bus. As soon as I got off, I bumped into an old schoolmate, Mark, and got late talking to him. When I clocked in, my boss had a go at me, telling me off in front of everybody. When I got over the initial shock, I told her I'd make up for being late. But it turned out that she had blown up over a deal that had fallen through after a client of mine had pulled out of a contract. She told me that I wouldn't get away with it, that I'd let everybody down, and just went on and on and on. Okay. Would you like to tell me how many phrases you have? Or words, maybe? You can write on the message if you want.
12.
7. Nidhi has written 7 phrases. Okay, interesting. 24 from Ahana. Excellent.
12.
6 from Preeti. 12. Venkat is saying 12. Okay. Ahana has written 24 words. Fine. All right. But I'm assuming they're keywords. Okay.
So someone
Anybody?
from Facebook writes set off, got off, bumped in, pulled out, let down. So there's about some 8 phrases there.
Okay. All right.
Some
Nidhi
say 12
writes
on
9.
Facebook.
Okay, all right, interesting. Fine, I'm going to read out the text once again, and I want you to add more words and phrases to your existing list, okay? When I set off for work this morning, my car broke down, so I ended up taking the bus. As soon as I got off, I bumped into an old schoolmate, Mark, and got late talking to him. When I clocked in, my boss had a go at me, telling me off in front of everybody. When I got over the initial shock, I told her I'd make up for being late, but it turned out that she had blown up over a deal that had fallen through after a client of mine had pulled out of a contract. She told me that I wouldn't get away with it, that I'd let everybody down, and just went on and on and on. Okay. Increased number of words and phrases this time.
From Facebook, it's 12. Ms Shalini Jain says it is 12.
Mm-hmm.
And someone has given a breakup of the words. They've said bump off, set off, makeup. Someone says 17.
Oh, wow.
So, yes.
So
Someone says
definitely an increase. Excellent.
it's obviously yes.
Yes, all right. Okay, I'm going to read out the text for the last time. And I want you to write down as much as you can this time. Okay. When I set off for work this morning, my car broke down. So I ended up taking the bus. As soon as I got off, I bumped into an old schoolmate, Mark, and got late talking to him. When I clocked in, my boss had a go at me, telling me off in front of everybody. When I got over the initial shock, I told her I'd make up for being late. But it turned out that she had blown up over a deal that had fallen through after a client of mine had pulled out of a contract. She told me that I wouldn't get away with it, that I'd let everybody down, just went on and on and on. Okay, I'll give you 1 minute to maybe rewrite your sentences. If you want to add, if you want to do any kind of editing to your text, please go ahead and do that. We need sentences this time, not just words and phrases. So try and put them in sentences now. I'll give you 2 minutes. That'll take time.
On Facebook, we are getting a lot of numbers.
Okay.
So it ranges between from 8 to 18 right now.
Okay.
Someone says 24.
Okay, so this time we are looking for sentences, not just words and phrases. So you might have a lot of phrases, you might have the meaning in your head. I want you to put that in sentences now. All right, maybe another 30 seconds and then we can stop. Okay, all right. Let's check the text. See if it matches with whatever you have so far.
Yes, I think it closely matches with someone, Miss Aksa Sheikh.
Okay.
She writes set off, broke down, got off, ended up, pulled off, let down, ended up, away. So she's given words.
Just given the phrases, not the sentences.
Phrases,
Yeah,
not
yeah. Right. So ideally, I mean.
Wait, I think there is something interesting over here on Facebook. So if I could just read this. She's Miss Kalra. She's written, when I set for work this morning, my car broke down, so I had to take the bus.
Nice.
Then I bumped into my friend Mark and got late. When I
Great.
clocked in, my boss told me off in front of everybody. I told him I'll make up for being late. Turns out a client of mine pulled out of a deal which got my boss to blow off his. One second, I'm just trying to. Yeah, to blow. Okay, I told him I'll make up for being late. Turns out a client of mine pulled out of a deal, which got my boss blow off this morning and told me I had disappointed everyone and won't be able to make up for it. So she's
Wow.
in the entire thing. I think kudos to her.
Impeccable. Wow, that's excellent. That's like it's 90% correct. So fantastic. Excellent job.
Monica Kalra.
Okay, hi Ms. Kalra. Excellent job done. I think that's as close as it gets in just three. Just listening to it just tries. So yeah, so that's the text. And like a lot of the people, many of you just wrote perhaps these underlined and highlighted phrases when you were listening to me. Is there a reason why you wrote down these phrases?
So just looking for answers from Facebook.
Yeah, so why those who wrote down these underlined highlighted phrases, which I think many did, I want to know why did you write down these phrases?
Looking for answers.
Okay.
Nothing as of now.
Okay. All right. So,
but there's someone who says, Ms. Rao says, as they are phrasal verbs, and Priyamvada Agarwal says because they provide details. To
exactly. Because these phrases, they contain meaning, and basically this, like the meaning these particular phrases contain, they actually give meaning to the text or the actual picture. So yes, they are content words or keywords. And in this context, they are phrasal verbs as well. So since somebody has rightly pointed out they are phrasal verbs, would anybody like to tell me what phrasal verbs are? Or like, what do you mean by phrasal verbs?
Phrasal verbs are, okay, I think she was just explaining, but yes, what are phrasal verbs? Looking for it. They are effective action words.
Not really.
Ms. Nirmala Narayan says these words give meaning to the sentences.
So do a lot of other words like nouns and adjectives.
Ms. Anne Oman says phrasal verbs describe the text.
Not really.
Ms. Megha Gupta says they are prepositional verbs as they are always attached with preposition.
Partly correct, not
and
fully.
Ms. Alknanda Sengupta says phrases which have a main verb with a preposition.
Yeah, that's right. So again, this is also partly correct.
And
so
adverb.
Yes,
and adverb.
Yes, exactly, correct. Okay, who was that?
It is Ms. Alknanda Sengupta.
Fantastic, Alaknanda. Thank you. Well done. Excellent. Okay, so let's check. All right, as rightly pointed out. So now we also see that phrasal verbs can be broken into these two categories. There is another category as well, which is separable and inseparable. But this is one particular category, transitive and intransitive. Do you know what transitive and intransitive mean? Anybody would like to give it a go?
Yes. Looking for answers again.
Okay.
Please bear with us because there's a lag between the streaming to the Facebook. So,
of course.
Yes. So, main verb plus adverb oblique preposition.
Which is a phrasal verb. What are transitive and intransitive phrasal verbs?
Yes. Someone says, give emphatic look and have adverb, preposition, and verb. Transitive verbs have an object.
Right, excellent. So, okay,
Sakshi Nagwani.
Sakshi, is it?
Yes.
Okay. Well done, Sakshi. So transitive phrasal verbs, they need an object. So let's do a quick recap of what phrasal verbs are. A lot of times what happens that a lot of people think that if we add a preposition or an adverb to a verb, it becomes a phrasal verb. No, that's not it. We can't just add any preposition or any adverb to a verb and make it a phrasal verb. So phrasal verbs are more like fixed phrases. They come together in that particular format to mean a particular thing always. Now, sometimes these phrases, they need a particular object to complete the meaning, and at other times they do not. So when they do need an object, it's called a transitive phrasal verb. When they do not need an object, it's called an intransitive phrasal verb. Let's take an example. Let's take a simple example, like wake up. So I woke up this morning at 8, whatever. I can also say that, yeah, I've woken up, and it does not need an object. I can also say, I have woken my mom up. So here it needs an object. So in this case, woke up or wake up can be both transitive and intransitive. So there will be such phrasal verbs as well, which can operate as both. So that's phrasal verb. Now, what we're going to do now is, let's say if you are a teacher and if you were teaching this lesson until now. So the first slide where I showed you the picture of a stressed out woman, till this point, if you were teaching this lesson, what do you think would be the stages? What, according to you, if you look back now, what do you think were the primary stages of this particular short lesson? You can write down your answers, whatever comes to your mind.
So, again, waiting for answers.
Okay. I think it will need a bit of thinking also before people respond.
Someone was asking you, Debarati, to repeat the question, if you could do so.
All right. Yes, of course. So my question was, those of you who attended this session from the beginning, if you look back at the session, so from this point, if you look back and look at the entire flow of the session, it has a particular, there are very specific stages built in this particular lesson for a particular reason. We'll come to the reason later, but if you can just look back at these stages, can you tell me what exactly we were doing or what were the primary things that we did? I can help you through. I think,
we are getting the answers.
Okay.
So, Mahek Sharma says, so first we plan how to introduce the phrasal verbs.
No, so this was the first slide. Let's start from here. This is the first thing we did. So
Ms. Alknanda Sengupta says warm up.
Okay, warm up. Okay.
Lead in with the passages and then elicit answers from SS.
Okay.
Slides, I guess.
So first is warming up. So basically I'm giving you a context. I'm giving you a situation for you to be able to relate. And this is a fairly simple situation which everybody is aware of. Like, we do get stressed out in our daily lives. So it's a very relatable situation. And then this was the text that I read out thrice. And each time you had to make some notes. So after the third time I read out the text, then I showed the text. So the first time I read out, I asked you to match, like whatever you guessed, if it matches with the text. Second time, you wrote down a few words. Third time, you wrote down phrases, and maybe some of you wrote sentences. And then you looked at this text and you matched, right? After that, we moved on to analyzing the highlighted words, the highlighted phrases, which you also had written down. And then we went into the analysis of the particular language here. Okay. Now this entire thing, this entire format has a particular name.
So Datta says it is called deductive approach to teaching.
Sorry, who's that?
Sakshi Datta.
It is, yeah, well, it is one of the many ways of using deductive approach. I'll give you that, yes. But this particular format has a particular name. So it has something to do with dictation. Like I was dictating, although I was not like dictating like school teachers would. I was reading at a normal pace, like I would speak. And I didn't stop. Nobody asked me that, please wait, let's finish this sentence. That was not allowed. So I just read out at a normal pace, and you had to write down whatever you could. So this particular thing, this a bit of dictation, this inclusion of dictation is what the name derives, where it derives itself from. So something to, who's that?
Alknanda Sengupta again.
Yes! Well done, Alaknanda. Fantastic. It is dictogloss. All right, let's have a look at what is dictogloss. Let's have a look at its meaning. Okay, so now that you see that dictogloss has 4 stages, do you think my lesson included these 4 stages? Can you just think back and tell me if this particular lesson had these 4 stages?
Just waiting for
Sure.
a comprehensive answer.
I'll just repeat my question. Did this particular lesson on phrasal verbs that we just did have all these 4 stages of a dictogloss lesson?
So Ms. Sakshi Nagwani agrees with you. She says yes, it had.
Okay.
Yeah, so everyone says it has.
Yes, there was one minor thing that was left out, which was the correction part. I do not know what everybody is writing at this point in time. If it was a physical class.
So
yes.
Shalini Sharma says, yes ma'am, this is what you've done, preparation, dictation, reconstruction, analysis, and corrections. So she includes correction also.
Yeah, so correction is what I could not do. In this case, you were self-correcting when you were matching your text with the text on the slide. You were self-correcting. In a classroom, maybe we would have access to each other's texts. We could peer correct. We could correct in groups, maybe. We could do all of that. So yeah, because of the virtual platform, we had to make that bit of change. Okay, all right. Now, I want all teachers, educators out there, whoever is there and whoever has ever stood in a training room and been a teacher, I'd like you to think about these questions. And as you, we can go with the first question. If anybody wants to write down their answers, maybe they could do that. If you used this lesson or this format, maybe not this lesson, but this format, how would you use it with your learners? Like, first of all, you have to identify whether you can use this with your learners or not. And then you can tell me how. Maybe which topic can you teach using this format?
Mm, I'm looking for answers.
Sure.
By using explanation of topic is what Shivani Sharma ma'am writes.
Explanation of topic. Could you be a little more elaborate, maybe?
Someone, she again says we have to introduction.
You can use it for an introductory class if that is what you mean, when you are introducing each other, when people are getting introduced to each other. You can do this actually. You can use it with a set of questions that you can call out, and they'll have to remember the question and the answer. We can build in those kind of format. We'll have to make a slight change to this text thing, but yes, you can do it for introductory class sessions. Yes. Any other response?
Okay, Shalini ma'am writes adverb prepositions can be used for middle classes.
Okay, if you build it in a text, yes, of course, absolutely, you can do that.
And
Excellent.
Shivani ma'am writes related pictures showing.
Yeah, showing pictures is always helpful, but in this case, because the text is also important and that is primary, so you can use images to maybe, like Alaknanda said earlier on, to lead into the particular situation or to lead into a particular context. So it's only to establish familiarity or relatability. For that, yes, images can work.
So Priyanka Das says it would be a great practice to increase their skills to create more focus.
Yes, that is absolutely correct. We'll come to the benefits. Let's move on to the next question. What changes would you make to this lesson to suit your students? So whoever is watching, I'm sure you work with a particular age group. Perhaps you work with a particular discipline, particular subject, particular domain. So think about your students in particular, and if you had to use this lesson, what what specific changes would you make? Maybe in a particular stage you want to make a change, maybe a stage that does not work for you or whatever, or maybe a stage that you want to add. So what major changes could you make?
Okay, someone says use color. Nirmala ma'am says use color.
Okay.
Ms Banerjee says teaching students listening skills, practice of listening, writing, speaking skills.
Yeah, this particular that's the beauty of this particular strategy, dictogloss, as a teaching approach. The beauty of this is it involves all the skills. You are speaking, you're reading, you're writing, you're listening. If you are in a classroom where or even if you are not in a physical classroom, but if you have access to interact with other people, you can also compare notes. Like when you were writing down words and phrases in while listening to the text, you could always compare your notes with another person, and that would give you scope to not only interact but also teach, correct each other. So that is, I mean, there are a lot of skills that can develop through this particular format of teaching. Yes, any major change that you would like to do, any major change to any stage, any of the 4 stages, if you think that would be required?
Neena ma'am says integrates all 4 skills.
It
She would
does.
like to yes. Sahana Gupta says take a text according to a class needed.
Sure.
That's exactly gradation.
Right.
Then Neetu Mathur ma'am says text can be given to students, read for a minute for a stage of preparation. It can be read for a minute for a stage.
That might defy the purpose, because if they have read it already, I mean, they will be reading it eventually. But you are also, if they are reading it, they will, I don't know how effective that is going to be when they will be listening to the same text after reading it. After reading it. So I mean, they can listen to it. This also gives them an opportunity to develop their listening skills. So they can listen to the text maybe thrice or even 4 times, and then eventually they will read. But now when they're going to read, after listening to it so many times, their reading will be a lot more focused. They know what they're reading and what they're looking for in that particular text. So now because they are attempting to reconstruct the text, this time when they're going to read, there will be a lot more attention to what they're reading, because perhaps they would be reading to fill out a few gaps in their own text, right? So it's always important that whenever a learner is reading or listening, they have a reason to read, they have a reason to listen. So if they read it in one go, they will not really have a reason to read at that point in time. So their reading will not really be very focused.
So Ms. Shuklare says, I would ask my students to try and write down words which they have heard for the first time.
Yes, that is excellent. I mean, that can be something that you can absolutely add as an additional stage, which is only for, learning new words, something that you can do maybe in your classroom, like create your own dictionary, classroom dictionary, or classroom word bank, so to speak. And yeah, certainly these words and these phrases can go into that bank. I think that would be a lovely idea. Anything else?
Yes. Ms. Sangeeta Nanda says, tell students to listen to the difficult words, note them down, find find meanings using dictionary, then
Right.
frame sentences.
Excellent. I think this is also giving learners the opportunity to be independent when you are not feeding them the meaning, but asking them to find out the meaning on their own. That gives them a lot of autonomy. And I think that is one of the essential skills that every teacher should empower his or her learners with, autonomy. So yeah, I think that would absolutely be important. And if you are doing a lesson on something like this, say phrasal verbs, or maybe if you're doing it on idiomatic expressions, you can also ask your students to maybe choose 5 phrases that are absolutely new for them, or maybe they have known but not used much in the past, and they can talk about it. Maybe think of a situation where that particular phrasal verb or idiomatic expression is apt, and talk about it, narrate it. So they not only speak, they not only get fluency, but they're also understanding the meaning of that particular phrase really well, so they won't forget easily. So yeah, I think that's a good idea.
Okay. Someone says, I think Manju ma'am says we can show a picture for a while, and after that we can also ask the students to describe it.
How would you build that in this particular format? Maybe what you could do is you can show a picture. So as a follow-up to this, maybe you could show a picture and ask your learners to maybe write down a short text. However they comprehend the picture, they can just write it down. And the same thing, I mean, whatever you did, if you're doing this particular lesson with your learners, if you're using this format, that is, now your learners can use that format and work the same thing with their partners. So they read out their texts, which they have written, seeing that picture which you have shown, and their partners need to write down words and phrases every time they listen to this text. And they can the learners can reconstruct each other's texts. So I think, yes, this could be an excellent idea if you're doing it as a follow-up to a dictogloss lesson.
And Ms. Imli Banerjee says, I would ask the students to identify the parts of speech after they're written the text in form of tables.
Sure. Yeah. So that is another stage to your language analysis. Maybe if you have some other focus, if you had, let's say if you're doing the same lesson, so you're doing phrasal verbs, you're analyzing phrasal verbs, and then another part of the lesson could be analyzing parts of speech, like you said. So yeah.
And Ms. Kalpana Tripathi says, at the preparatory level, a word wall can be created, thus enhancing the thinking, speaking, and writing skills. Also increase the concentration level.
Yeah, so we are coming back to the format of the lesson again. So that is exactly how this format is, and why it is an extremely effective way of enhancing all the skills of a particular learner. So yeah, so we are answering the penultimate question, actually, the benefits of using this particular format. Yes.
So the next answer is, we can ask the children to summarize what they have heard in their own words.
Yes, absolutely. We can always do that. So in fact, before they read the text, before they kind of match their texts with the original text, so the aim always the aim is always to reconstruct the same text as close to the original piece as possible. So before you show the original piece, you can always ask them to write down what they have comprehended, like you said, and then you can show the text. So I think, again, there will be more focused reading if they do that. So yeah, that's a good idea.
And leading to context, listen, comprehend, reproduce.
I'm sorry.
These are the multiple aspects of language. So yeah.
Okay. All right, let's move on to the next question. Can you use this lesson as is with any particular grade? So if there are language teachers watching this, maybe they can answer this question. So yeah, so if you use this lesson without making any changes, you have to keep in mind that you are going to teach these many phrasal verbs, and that is the grade of the language.
So
which grade?
Seema ma'am believes it is for the middle grades.
Can you be a little more specific?
So should they mention the classes?
They could, or maybe level.
Anisa ma'am says it could be used with grade 6.
Okay, all right. So you mean grade 6 and up, or like grade 6 to grade 8? Is there any range?
6 upwards.
6 and up. Okay, all right. And if there are language teachers, is there any particular level? Like, at what level can you teach this? Will you teach it at pre-intermediate level? Will you teach it at intermediate level, or upper intermediate level, or advanced level? At which level could you teach?
Ms. Alpnanda Sengupta says again for intermediate and advanced level.
So yeah, intermediate and up. Yeah, maybe strong intermediate and up, rather, and upper intermediate and so on. All right, let's move on to the next question. What can be the challenges of using this format in class? I think many of us have answered the benefits of using this format. It is a multi-skill development, language development sort of a format. So it's excellent if you want to brush up on all the skills. But do you think this format can have challenges as well? Is there any possibility?
So again, waiting for answers. Not all learners will be able to. challenging for a group of low learners is the answer. Then
Okay,
TA
so
students will struggle.
so regarding that particular statement for low level learners, the grade of the text or even the length of the text would also be different. So the length of the text perhaps would be a lot shorter, maybe 2 sentences or 3 sentences. The grade of the text would be a lot more simpler. So that is one thing that we have to keep in mind. I mean, you can only use this lesson as is for a specific level. You cannot use it with every class. You cannot use it with every level. You can use the format, but not the lesson as is. You can use this format to teach other things through other kinds of texts. So that is not a challenge for this particular format. We want to know if this format has any drawbacks.
Someone says challenging for low level. Again, it's a repeated answer that we get. So looking for more answers. Students with low motivation and challenging for special kids. They would be interested if used at a lower speed.
Okay.
Is what someone writes.
Sure.
Grammar competency of students is a must. Okay. Slow learners improve their vocabulary. Of course, bit hard for them, but will be useful.
Okay, so one challenge that I can think of right now is if somebody has a disability in comprehension, or if somebody has a hearing disability, or if somebody has a disability with writing at a certain speed. Apart from these, I cannot right now think of any other challenges, but I'll be happy to hear if anybody does come up with a challenge. Would be interesting to discuss and check that.
Ms. Kunika writes, it is based majorly on listening skills of the students, so might find it difficult.
Okay, so I'm assuming if we are teaching in a particular region, in a particular class, the students are habituated to listening to us because we are teaching them. We are meeting them more than once, right? So if they understand what we speak, if they understand what we say, then they will be able to understand what we are reading out loud, because that's not going to be any different. In fact, it actually boosts your listening skills because, and it's live reading. So it's live listening. So yes, please go ahead.
The next challenge is with it would be difficult with ADHD students and also students with dyslexia.
Yes, yeah, that's what I was thinking. Yeah, so if you have special abilities, then it could be a problem. I'm not too sure if it will be. But I think one thing as educators we must keep in mind when we are reading it out, when we are reading out anything, or whatever we are saying in the class, or to our learners, they would try and imitate, especially if it's a new word, if it's a new phrase, or if it's a new style of talking. They would try and ape what we are doing. So it's very, very important that what we are saying out loud in front of our learners are modeled correctly. So if you have to read out a particular text, and if it has words that are perhaps new to you, even ensure that you understand, that you know the right pronunciation of those words, because when your learners are listening to those words, they would be using those words at some point in time, and they would be imitating you. So as trainers, as teachers, we need to ensure that we are correct, we are modeling the words appropriately and accurately. So so do you think there are any more challenges?
Yes.
Okay.
Shardaman says, challenge in my school is teachers have a challenge in reading. So it's with the educators themselves.
Okay, all right. So, all right. So that does not mean, okay, so that means the format is not a faulty format. There's nothing wrong with the format as such. But yes, there could be other challenges depending on who is teaching, who is, taking in that input, where we are, what are other difficulties, etc. But I think the format, dictogloss format, is a pretty effective one.
And Ms.
Yes.
Banerjee says, like, sometimes comprehending pronunciation becomes a problem, especially if it would be in recording.
Okay, if it is a recorded one, okay, if I'm playing a recorded audio, in that case, I will have to ensure that it's an internationally accepted pronunciation. If my learners are not familiar with that particular pronunciation, I could either make them familiar with that particular accent or pronunciation by playing other tapes with similar accent and pronunciation. Or it could just be a great opportunity for my learners to be exposed to a particular style of speaking that would be nice to ape, maybe. What you can also do is, if it is absolutely new and if you think that it could be challenging for your learners, A is play a short tape, and B is play number of times so that they can comprehend. Again, with low-level learners or learners whose listening skills are not very developed, or they are not, their ears are not in tune with a particular style of speaking, then yeah, feel free to increase the number of times that you're playing the tape, or the number of times that you're reading it out loud.
Yeah, so Shardaman agrees that the format is good.
Okay.
But Ms. Sahana Gupta says we need to be picture perfect.
We need to be picture perfect.
Yes, that's what she reckons. Yes.
Okay.
And someone has agreed with her also.
Okay, all right. Okay, moving on to the last question then. If you were to deliver a lesson using this format in a classroom, in a physical classroom, would there be anything else that you would like to add? Something that I couldn't because it's a virtual platform. I would have loved to add a lot of other things. Okay, so one thing that perhaps I would add is something that I said earlier on, that a text that they can write on their own, and they can practice this text reconstruction by pairing up with someone, or maybe a small group. That is something that would be interesting to do in a face-to-face class. We could also take those texts which the students have written, and we can put them up on the walls, and we could make sort of a gallery walk, like where people can read the texts and maybe comment on the text, or maybe choose the best text, or maybe correct each other's language or whatever. So in a face-to-face classroom, I could maybe use something like this. What else would you like to add?
Someone says asking questions related to the topic.
Okay, yeah.
Teamwork.
You can get into the depth of the topic, yes, of course.
Making groups and interacting among themselves.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is peer work.
Mm-hmm.
And then teamwork is something that a teacher writes, and peer assessment.
Yes. Any particular activity that you can maybe include?
Our students can work in pairs, mutually dictate.
Right. Which is similar to what we just discussed.
We can also group discussion using new vocabulary.
Yeah, or like somebody said, that we can get into the depth of the topic itself. So of course, I think a blend of the two sounds more effective. So maybe a group discussion on something to do with the topic, where they not only discuss their opinions, share arguments, etc., but they also use language from the text that they have just been exposed to. So yeah, maybe an amalgamation of the two could work.
And someone has suggested dramatize, and also we could conduct quizzes.
Yes, I think,
and
yeah, yes, role plays and drama, I think that would also be lovely, which would mean that, so this text was more like a narrative. If you want them to enact, if you want them to add dialogues, then I think that could be an icing on the cake. So they will have to rewrite that text so that there are characters and they have dialogues now. So that's a different genre of writing that you are subtly introducing there, which is also amazing. And then they can, enact it. They could be shorter groups, and every group can put up their own act. And, they can vote for each other or whatever. Yeah. So I think that could be a great idea. Role plays, yes, of course. Similar thing. Yeah.
Then Ms. Soni says using particular chapter related new words could be found out and frame a story and ask students which new words they have listened first time.
Yeah. Right. So this is something similar to what somebody said about making a vocab bank or finding out what are the new words that you learned. So yeah, something that sounded similar. So making a class word bank or a class dictionary of sorts.
So Ms. Megha Gupta says extempo could work.
Extempore, yes. That would depend on the topic, actually. If you think that the topic is such where we can have, let's say if the topic is education, for example. Now we can have a lot of topics related to education on which you can have extempore sessions. So yeah, that would depend on the topic of choice, yes.
Okay, next, Ms. Nirmala Narayanan says scrambled sentences.
Yes, for lower level, if you are, lower level in terms of the level of proficiency, not necessarily the age. So yes, of course, unscrambling sentences could be great if you want to teach them sentence construction. So yes, absolutely.
Dumb charades is a game that they suggest could be played.
Yes. And if I can add to that, you can play dumb charades with these, with the particular language maybe, or with some keywords. So if I were to play dumb charade as a follow-up to this lesson, I would perhaps, use these particular phrasal verbs for that dumb charade activity. In a way, I would sort of recycle the words, and it would be like a revision to what they just learned. So yeah, I think that can also work. What else?
Ms. Rachna has written something which is pretty long, however. The benefit is we could ask students to use and find out phrases through dictogloss in their normal conversation with friends, and teachers to memorize.
I'm not too sure.
We can also ask them to find out adjectives, nouns, etc.
Right. So but I think somebody said that, we can ask them to find out other parts of speech. So yes. I think this is similar to that. Yes.
Jumbled words.
Yeah. Sound scrambling, jumble. Yes.
I think show and tell.
Yes, absolutely. For visual learners, definitely show and tell could work wonders.
Ms. Megha Gupta says crossword puzzles could be played.
Yes. If you're teaching specific words and phrases, then yes, absolutely, and that will also clarify their meaning. So yeah.
I think the answers are more or less being repeated. So. Sudoku. Yeah. Sudoku. Yes.
Yeah. So. Okay, talking about crosswords and Sudoku, in fact, there are a lot of other games. I mean, games is again a huge topic worth exploring. So whatever the lesson that you're doing, some sort of recycling or some sort of consolidation activity if you want to do, games are always excellent. You can also use games to, sort of do a follow-up to a lesson like this, where you are analyzing language at the end of the text. So to recycle those phrases or the language that you just taught, games can absolutely be wonderful. We have online games also these days. In a physical classroom, you can have paper-based games, or maybe have a particular board that you can create, and you can design your own game boards. So, say for example, if you're doing a lesson like this, you can have the cubes or the dices or whatever with some of these phrases written. You can also have pictures to match with the phrasal verbs, especially for lower level learners or maybe younger kids. Because of course, visual memory is one of the strongest memories. So if they can see a picture that relates to that particular phrase, then retention will be a lot longer. So yeah.
Yes. So someone, Anjali ma'am has written. We can also. One second. Yes. We can also match the words, find the synonyms, antonyms, singular, plural word can also be used by the students to jot down. You can also ask the students to jot down these words.
Yes,
so this
I
could be
mean,
an activity.
Right. So if you want to explore about each of these particular phrasal verbs, I mean, there's a lot that can be done. So if we just quickly look at, say, got off. Yeah. So the verb here is get, and you add off. So what other prepositions can we add to the word get to make a meaningful phrasal verb? So that can be one way of approaching it. You can get into synonyms and antonyms. You can talk about the origin of the word. You can talk about other words which mean the same. Maybe other phrases which mean the same. You can also think of, are there any idiomatic expressions using this particular word or this particular phrase? So if you want to explore into the depth of the word, that is actually one of the excellent ways to learn a word, because you are not learning that word in isolation. You're learning that word in context. You're learning different aspects of the word, different forms of the word. So I mean, you're not only learning one word, but in order to learn one word, you're learning a lot of other words as well, and they are all thematically connected. So whenever you maybe think of one word, all the other words perhaps could get triggered. So you will be ready with a set of words, not just one word, so to speak. So yeah, so that can be one good way of approaching. Okay. Anything else?
So Ms. Sonia Agrawal says this method could be used in other subjects also. Really
Yes.
sounds effective.
Yeah, exactly. So not just a language classroom, we can use it for other subjects also, other disciplines as well. Apart from a language classroom, for that matter, can you think of other disciplines, other subjects where you can use this format in class? So it's more like you are not teaching in the beginning. So if you want to think about your subject, and if you want to relate dictogloss to your subject, think of what is it that you would not like to teach at the outset. You want to introduce them to it. You want them to comprehend it, and you want to help them analyze it at the end. What is it that you can teach through this process?
So teachers have said first EVS, then science.
Okay.
And for experiments, someone says, Ms. Kalra says, for science, for example, explaining the process of photosynthesis.
Nice.
Shalini ma'am and Mahek ma'am, both of them agree that it can be done for social studies also.
Yes. Also, if I can maybe suggest a slight change to this format. So let's say if we can take the element of dictation out of it, which is not going to be justified for the name, but keeping the broad framework intact, instead of a text, if we can say, since you're talking about science, if you're talking about, say, a flow chart of sorts, maybe a process of something that's happening. So if you can show an image or a short video, and you show it for a few seconds and then you stop. If you're showing an image, for example, you show it for a few seconds and then you remove it, and then you ask them to maybe write down what they saw or what they understood. So that could be another way of, teaching something without really lecturing or without really doing a lot of talking. And at the end, you can simply check whether they have understood, whether they have comprehended it accurately or not. So I think for science lessons, or for any subject where you think there are processes and stuff that you need to show, I think this could be something that you can try. It would be fun. So they don't have to read anything. You don't have to read anything. You just show maybe a short video or an image, and they have to write down what they understand.
I think, but for mathematics, I read all the other subjects. Especially geography, general knowledge, wisdom is someone's thought.
Lovely. I think, yeah, that would be, philosophy would be the most interesting, isn't it? Everybody would have a different answer.
Yes. And moral values could be taught using this. Someone goes to say, my subject is chemistry, and try to integrate it with English through the class. That's what Ms. Rachna Jain says.
Yeah, so which also means, because in science subjects, there's a lot of terms that we have to learn, and many children, especially those who study in vernacular medium, if they want to study further, after a point in time, their books will all be English, maybe after 12th or whatever. So the books will eventually be in English. So if they can understand certain terms in English better from a younger age, I think it's going to help them remarkably later on, because it's going to be a pictorial memory of the whole thing. It's going to be like a flow chart that's going to be there with them. So this is, I think, something that can work with them as well.
So once we begin to discuss about value-based education, I see a lot of people suggesting, yes, we agree, values should also be taught using dicta class. And
yes,
that's what we are doing now. Art integrated learning is what Ms. Shalini Sharma says.
Lovely, beautiful. Yeah, I think art itself is such, I think every individual has a creative aspect to them. There's a creative side to everybody. It's just that the kind of surrounding that we all are in sort of arrests that creativity up to a point in time and does not let us give it wings, so to speak. So if you integrating art or creativity in whatever we are doing actually helps us fall in love with that particular subject or discipline a lot more than if we were just to sit and memorize a few dates or numbers or definitions, for that matter, or equations for that matter.
Exactly.
So yeah.
But why don't I see mathematics in this?
I want to see mathematics in the list, and I want somebody to tell me that yes, dicta class can be done in a mathematical class.
But I think indirectly they've been suggesting that, because they say integrated projects can also be, I think, dictogloss. Using dictogloss, you can do a lot of integration, cross-curricular integration.
Yes, exactly. That is very, very interesting. I'm glad that somebody, who wrote that, by the way, if I can know the name.
The commenters just floated. Yes, Ms. Sahana Gupta has talked about integrated projects. And Shalini Sharma ma'am has said all subjects can be integrated.
Yeah, so multiple subjects can actually be integrated. So there is a particular course called CLIL, Content and Language Integrated Learning. So if anybody is interested or curious about teaching techniques or teaching methodology, and if you teach schools, CLIL is one particular course that you can check out. It actually talks about integrating language with different subjects, irrespective of the subject and irrespective of what is the focus of the language. And by language, we don't mean you're teaching English language grammar, but the language of that subject. So it's very interesting if you can like get hold of it, or if you can do a bit of reading up about it as well. I think it can actually help you in planning your lessons. And I mean, from my association with a lot of school teachers, this is something that I have realized that they find it boring after a point in time. That is the same lesson that they are teaching to that same grade. So I think it takes away your exhaustion and boredom as a teacher as well, if you can experiment with different things, and if you can make your learners autonomous and make them independent learners, things that they can comprehend and analyze and question and inquire and all of that. So that is very, very important. So this is one such format which actually encourages people to be curious and comprehend things on their own without always relying on somebody. So eventually you're actually imparting a very, very important life skill, and that is independence. You do not want your learners to be reliant on an expert all throughout their lives. I mean, we talk an awful lot about people who can't do things on their own, and this is, I think, one particular skill that we should impart to our learners, and that's a responsibility that we all have. Somebody I think mentioned about asking the learners to look up the words in the dictionary and not give them the meanings. Exactly. So I think, yeah, so I think that I mean, you have to take little steps. I mean, one fine morning you can't just show up in your class and say, okay, I'm going to stop teaching, I'm going to stop lecturing, and everything you're going to find out on your own. And if that has not been your style of teaching, of course you can't do that. But you will have to integrate shorter stages, tasks, activities that can make them familiar with the idea of independence, or trying to find things out on your own. And it is not only going to be limited to your classroom scenario, it will be carried out in other aspects of life as well, trying to do things on your own, trying to resolve things on your own. So that's a very important life skill to impart.
Yes, and someone says, I think Soniman says students become explorers.
Exactly.
Using dictogloss.
In other words, that was simply put, yes.
So someone compliments the session by saying it's an effective brainstorming that's happening right now.
Thank you. Yes, that was the aim, that we can all brainstorm together.
So Mr. Chidambaram says we have newspaper activity for all the students and teachers. Perhaps I think he reckons it's about cross-curricular integration.
Okay.
Newspaper.
All right. Yes, yeah. I mean, that can also be an interesting exercise to do, the newspaper exercise.
And Ms. Koral Gupta says students learn self-analysis, which is a life skill.
Yes, exactly. Reflection. And see, the thing is, the fact that somebody just mentioned about brainstorming, when we brainstorm, a lot of ideas pour out, and we say that, too many cooks spoil the broth, but too many minds do not. So if we have multiple minds, and if multiple people can come together and brainstorm, beautiful ideas emerge. So the fact that we all are discussing right now, so many ideas are pouring in, and we are all having access to that particular information. If we can transfer the same thing into our classroom and encourage our learners to discuss, to brainstorm, to comprehend, to analyze, to question, I think the entire classroom environment could be transformed radically. And we don't need to tell our students that, put fingers on your lips. I mean, those days are gone, and they better be gone. we want them to be interactive. We want them to be collaborative. We want them to, be independent, like we have been saying. We want them to develop other skills through the process. And if we can create that environment in our classroom, which is going to be like a mini a world, sort of a simulation of the real world, I think we should indulge in that as educators. I mean, it's not just the discipline that we're teaching, but I think we have bigger responsibilities to shoulder. So
Exactly.
So yeah.
And I think there's an overwhelming agreement on what you'd said on Facebook. So everyone agrees to this thought of brainstorming.
Yeah.
And Ms. Rachna Jain says, when a science teacher can find too many interesting and new ideas, I think students will definitely be benefited by that.
Absolutely. And multiple brains are better than one, right? Like, I mean, let's say if a teacher who is, say, for example, 35 years old walks into a classroom and there are 20 10-year-olds there, the cumulative age is more than the age of the teacher, and we should not discount that.
Yes.
They could, their world experience could be limited according to you, but perhaps not. I mean, let them also come up with what their idea or their comprehension of the world around them is, or what they know already. So it's very important to find out what your students know before we start, cramming them with information. So we need to check the space available for download first,
Exactly. And I think there is a wonderful summary here from Ms. Raki Dattagupta. She says, my takeaway, exploring myself and creating future explorers. Insightful session, interesting. English is everywhere. LAC through English is the need of the day. Multiple intelligence and education is very important.
Yes, extremely important that we cater to different intelligences or different learning styles. I mean, we have to understand that every learner, every individual is different. Like, we all learn differently, irrespective of our age. Maybe with a little more experience than the kids in classroom, we perhaps have a few extra skill sets, but our learning abilities are fairly specified. I mean, they revolve around 2 to 3 or max 4 perhaps. So yeah, I mean, it's very important that we do cater to different learning styles in the classroom, that we cater to multiple intelligence, and that we plan lessons keeping these factors in mind, that every learner in my class should have something to take away from the session. So yeah, that's a very important question that I think every teacher needs to ask himself or herself, whether every learner can take something away from the class. Yeah.
Okay, so I think more or less these are the answers. Yes.
Okay, all right. So this is one particular reference link that you can start with. You can note it down, or you can, I don't know if you can take a picture or not. So yeah, so that's one particular place where you can start reading up about dictogloss. And the reason why I have mentioned this particular link is it's a simplified explanation of the process. It has example of a dictogloss lesson in this particular website. So you will not only read up about what is dictogloss and what are the stages, etc. You will also have a lesson to maybe fall back on. And of course, you will have this particular video to refer to in case you want to revisit certain parts of it. If you are interested, there are, of course, a lot of other articles that you can read up. You can always go on the internet and look up scholarly articles on dictogloss. And you should be able to get a lot of articles that you can read up. So yeah.
All right.
That's about it.
Thank you so much, Ms. Roy. Well, that was an
Yeah.
amazing session. An amazing session. And I think everybody enjoyed. Thank you so much for this. And thank you all of you for your lovely participation. All of you were just too good. Thank you so much, everybody. Again, have a good evening and please stay safe.
Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye. Have a lovely evening.